Hi, my name is Christine Tovey, and good afternoon, everybody. And I want to welcome you to this webinar, Where the Rubber Meets the Road, an industry and academic panel discussion about CanCOVID or COVID-related innovations. Before we begin, we'd like to take a quick audience poll, see who's there in the audience. Do most of you identify as a researcher, as an industry partner, or are you in a government-related position? So you should see the poll come up on your screen, and we'd like you in Slack, and we'd like you to tell us who you are so we know who's out there. Okay, we've got 34 people in the audience. Looks like a good half of them are academia and research, 31% government, and there's always a few others. So yeah, we've got a nice spread with industry as well. So get the last few people in just to get as accurate as possible, precision and accuracy. Yeah, I think we've got a good idea. It's about half academia and then split sort of, you know, depending on the numbers, half, a quarter each for industry and government and a few others. Great. Excellent. All right. Anyone feel that they're in both would be interesting, but yes. Okay. So as I said, my name is Christine Tovey. I've been in aerospace and defense for longer than I'd like to think here, the US and Europe. So I've dealt a lot with innovation and bringing innovation to bear in that sphere. I am, along with Yvette Vera Perez, the co-moderator of the industry collaboration stream of CanCOVID's platform, where we're encouraging industry to get engaged with a rapid response towards CanCOVID or towards COVID solutions. And really what we wanted to do was to put together this session to encourage people to get to know each other, to highlight their skills or where they might need skills, and start to kick some collaboration along. Consider this, as I lived in California for a very long time and visited a lot of wineries while I was there, this is a taster flight. So you've got a number of collaborations or innovation opportunities that we're just going to have a little bit of a taste to. And we're hoping this will pique your interest, that you'll want to go and learn more. And our platform for encouraging collaboration is the Slack. So if you haven't already registered for the Slack, we encourage you to get on Slack because we use that a lot. But really, this is just to whet your appetite and see if we can engage people in a more fruitful and wider network to deliver solutions to our current crisis at the moment. So if Kimberly, you want to put up the slides at this point, we've got a number of presenters on slide, but this event is co-hosted by CanCOVID and Explore IP, and we'll learn more about Explore IP later on. CanCOVID is Canada's transdisciplinary rapid response network for science to policy COVID-19 research, and Explore IP is Canada's IP collaboration opportunities with the public sector patent holders. So we're pleased that we're being joined by a number of organizations, both on the academia as well as the government side. So we're going to hear presenters from University of Toronto, McGill, the Innovative Experience Branch, Innovation Solutions Canada, Explore IP, and the Canadian Intellectual Property Office. So without further ado, pardon me, before we move on to the presenters, I just want to say we're going to have a Q&A at the end of this session for all presenters. So I would like you to hold your questions. And what we're doing is we're encouraging people to type in their questions into the Slack channel, into the industry collaboration Slack channel. And there we're going to curate them, and then I'm going to repose them to the panel for them to answer in real time. Et si vous préférez, vous pouvez poser vos questions en français et je vais faire l'interprétation pour les présentateurs. So please, if you are more comfortable in French, we'll make sure that your questions are also presented to the panelists. So a few housekeeping rules. During the presentation, please turn off your microphones as well as your video. I'm going to say it one more time because it's really important. Please log on to CanCOVID Slack channel, particularly the industry collaboration theme, and leave your questions in that theme. So without further ado, because we have a very packed schedule with a lot of exciting people who have things to talk about, I'd like to hand over to Dr. Shana Kelly from the University of Toronto and the director of PRIME, which is a precision medicine initiative. And she's going to talk to us about some of the stuff in diagnostics that she's been working on. So over to you, Shana. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Christine. And thanks for having me here today. It's a pleasure to tell you about some of our latest research. I'm Shana Kelly. I'm a professor at the University of Toronto. I run a research lab at U of T. I'm also the director of PRIME, which is a precision medicine initiative. And I'm going to tell you a quick story today about a new technology that we've been working with as a new type of diagnostic tool for COVID-19. A little bit more about my group. We're a group of about 30 members, very interdisciplinary, spanning chemistry, biochemistry, engineering. We do a lot of work on diagnostic development, platforms for drug discovery, and we're also very focused on translation and commercialization. We not only aspire to write great papers, but also file patents. We've spun companies out of the lab with quite a bit of work on point-of-care diagnostics over the last few years. Next slide, please. So the work I'm going to tell you about today is aimed at delivering really a new type of diagnostic testing capability that we think will be very powerful for managing the current COVID-19 pandemic and the future pandemics that I think without a doubt we will grapple with. And so this is a viral detection method. It directly looks at viral particles in the mouth. We call it VIDE, just with a nod to the Latin word for life, because to live and to keep living, we're going to need better diagnostics to avoid the types of situations that we've been in thus far with the current pandemic. This is a technology that we now have 2 patents filed on. We have a preprint if you're interested in learning more about the technology. It's not about the COVID work, it's about the foundational work, but it'll tell you about our sensing system. And next slide, please. I could literally stand here, for an hour and tell you about the current situation with COVID-19, how diagnostic tools are being applied to the problems that we're facing, and really detail for you all of the challenges that we're grappling with given the bottlenecks in our current diagnostic testing workflows. But since I only have 10 minutes, I can't do any of that. So I refer you to this talk that I gave a couple weeks ago, and this will really take you through exactly how diagnostic tools are currently being used and where I think we need to go. So this is on the YouTube U of T pharmacy channel if you want to take a look. Next slide, please. But really the bottom line from that presentation is that we urgently need new types of testing tools for viral pathogens. And our current situation where we're trying to process all of our tests in laboratories and trying to really push throughput in clinical labs, I think is really not a solution to what we're facing right now. Anytime there's a surge in cases, it's the first thing on the headlines, right? That we can't handle the testing volumes. And I believe honestly that the only solution to this is to enable people to test themselves. So rather than asking people who might be sick that we're asking everybody to stay home, then when somebody thinks they need a test, we tell them to go out and get a test. Well, let's find a way to allow people to test themselves at home. Let's find a way to enable point of care testing where there could be more decentralized testing. And let's also find ways to test our environment so that we can see surges of viral outbreaks coming. And this is really going to require a huge push. And in the talk I just referred to, I talked a bit about a moonshot for new diagnostics. I think that if we can put a man on the moon, we can put these tools in people's hands so that we're not dealing with such a crippling pandemic like the one we faced thus far. And I think this would really enable us with these types of capabilities to better take care of our healthcare workers, better take care of people in long-term care, as well as their families and the people that are supporting folks in long-term care. We need to have testing capabilities that work in remote areas, and if God forbid the pandemic did reach areas in northern Canada, we would need ways to care for those parts of the populations as well. And then we have a border that's causing us a lot of problems at the moment because of the country on the other side of the border where I happen to be from. And we just need better ways to deal with the fact that there is this virus among us, rather than just closing things down, separating families, crippling businesses, all of the things that are going on right now. So I'll quickly tell you about the solution that we're developing. Next slide, please. And this is a testing system where you would actually sample for the virus in somebody's mouth. So rather than taking a sample, shipping it to a lab, instead we would just take a disposable testing probe, park that in the mouth for a minute, just like if you were taking a temperature reading in the mouth, and then know whether or not there are viral particles present. We know that SARS-CoV-2, people that are harboring infections, in addition to having it in their nasopharyngeal tract, it's present in the saliva. So why not just test directly in the mouth? And we think that this would be incredibly powerful, again, just to take a quick read, you know, at an airport, at a border crossing, healthcare worker going to work, a person in long-term care, a family member who wants to visit, you know, all of these use cases where right now we're really stuck given the way that we test, again, in centralized labs, nasopharyngeal swabs, day-long turnaround times. This would really be a paradigm shift. Next slide, please. So the tricky thing here is, how do we do this? So how do we make a disposable testing probe that can report on the presence of a virus? And this is something we've been thinking about for quite a while, totally different set of applications, but how do we make reagentless sensors? And reagentless meaning that we don't need any reagents, any chemicals, anything coming in from the outside, that we have a standalone autonomous sensor that regenerates itself and can just be used, again, without anything coming from the outside. Again, just the way you might take a temperature reading with a temperature probe. And so our sensor is basically this little biomolecular complex that's drawn out here. It has an antibody at its, on its terminus, and that antibody is going to bind a viral particle. The way we read out whether that viral particle is bound is just through the diffusional motion of that molecular construct on this electrode surface. It just turns out that it flops with a certain frequency. If the antibody binds a huge viral particle, that flopping really slows down. And so we read that out. Next slide, please. And so that's how this sensor works. It's for the scientists who are on the call, we apply a potential to the sensor surface that draws the sensor down in a very reproducible way. And then we just measure the kinetics of that transport. Next slide, please. And so that transport, if you think about an unbound sensor, which is on the left, and then one that has this enormous viral particle bound to it, I mean, it's not that big, but relatively speaking, it's much, much larger than the sensor. You can see in the top left that the kinetics of the electrochemical current that we measure slow way, way down. And so that's how we transduce the presence of the virus. But again, we're not adding enzymes. We're not adding any kind of chemicals. It's just a little sensor. I can see a question popping up already about what's the cost. This is a very expensive, inexpensive, tiny piece of gold wire that we use as our sensor. So we see these disposable units as costing about $1 a piece. And you use it once, you throw it away. So there's no contamination between people, and you're not contaminating the testing device. So next slide, please. So we've done quite a bit of testing with this approach over the last few months. We have really good proof of concept data showing that our sensitivity is the same as the gold standard tests that are used in centralized labs. We're now developing this handheld prototype to show how the testing system would actually work. We're very fortunate that we've been given access to some clinical specimens that will allow us to establish levels of clinical sensitivity and specificity. We're also very fortunate at the University of Toronto to have a biosafety level 3 lab where the SARS-CoV virus is being cultured. And so we can now actually do measurements showing this ability to measure in the mouth in an animal model of SARS-CoV-2. And again, very fortunate to have that capability so close to us at the University of Toronto. So I just want to end by saying that, we're doing a lot with this at University of Toronto. We're taking this as far as we can as a research group, but we're actively seeking development and commercialization partners. We want to take these prototypes that we're building in-house and rapidly turn them into clinical grade prototypes. We're going to need partners to do that. We're going to need financial resources to do that as well. But we think this is a very worthwhile capability to develop, again, to help us now, help us in the future. And there are many other applications of this type of sensing. So last slide, just to mention other resources that are here at the University of Toronto. These links will stay in the presentation so that you can use them after this event is over. There's a lot going on at the University of Toronto in COVID-19 research on the clinical side, on the basic research side. PRIME, the Precision Medicine Initiative that I'm leading, we have a whole task force around COVID-19. So please don't hesitate to reach out, use the links here, get in touch with me, and happy to help you find a type of research or capability or to talk to you about our work. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Shanna. Yeah, really exciting, because I think we've seen in the world that the countries who really push out testing are the ones that are being most successful in terms of their response to COVID-19. So as we move forward, this is definitely going to be something that should be at the top of our list. So moving on, because we've got such a great panel, I'd like to introduce Dr. Marcel Baer from McGill, who is a part of the McGill Interdisciplinary Initiative for Infection and Immunity. And where Shana was on the testing side, I think this is more on the virology side. So over to you, Dr. Baer.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Shana, for introducing a very discrete issue and how it actually interfaces with the need for other capacity and teams around. I'm going to sort of come at the issue from the opposite direction. So I'm going to tell you how we looked at McGill at all the needs. And you can see the logos involved and how we drilled down and created smaller teams. So the next slide. The way I see it, COVID has kind of hit us around November to the genome sequence in early January. We got a pathogen, a disease in February. And if we take the next, we could then see that it came to Canada. Just hit next, please. It came into Canada in January, Quebec, and February. We shut down here, and March, the first wave has hopefully ended, but we're all afraid of the next wave. So here's a timeline over a scale of about 6 months. And next, you can then look what we've done at the MI4 team. We created an emerging threats competition in January where we funded 16 projects. Then we funded 20 more in a later competition, and also partner with social sciences. But I'm going to talk more about the MI4 COVID platforms, because at a certain point we realized there was going to be CICHR funding, there were going to be national teams, and we had to make sure that our platforms were there to support the researchers like Shana, who came to us with really brilliant ideas to make sure that they didn't face speed bumps and bottlenecks. So next. So one of the platforms I'll tell you about is our clinical research platform, where we asked 2 leads, Marina Klein at the MUHC and Chris Greenaway at the Jewish General Hospital, and we provided them platform funding so there would be teams of people who could enable the investigators to come and bring in their projects and write grants and do the trials. And this all has happened really since March. So right now we're in July. So over the past 3.5 months or so, between having the capacity to do clinical research in place when we got hit by wave number 1. And then if you hit the next slide, you see that we've already had 1 New England Journal article, and the next slide, 1 in the Annals of Internal Medicine. And things are so fast these days that things are getting published online, like the Annals, before the PDF has been created. So all I was able to find online was this infographic. The article is published, but they haven't even done the copywriting yet. And then if you look at what's ongoing, if you go next, there's several studies here that I could mention. And here I've just provided the links to clinicaltrials.gov, where the CATCO study has had partners with AbbVie and Apotex, and now with Gilead, because remdesivir is going in. The CONCOR study has partners with Canadian Blood Services and AMA Quebec. The Disconnect study, which is about to recruit, has Hoffman LaRoche. So having the platform to do clinical research has attracted CIHR-funded non-governmental agencies and industry partnership. And there are several companies who are currently in negotiation to do the next set of clinical trials. So that's one platform. And then go to the next slide, please. The other platform that I'd like to tell you about is our Containment Level 3 platform. Like Shana said, University of Toronto has one. We actually have 2 Level 3 labs. And what we did is we brought together a team of people who had expertise in virology, Chen Liang, immunology, Maz Devangahi. I'm actually a tuberculosis researcher. I haven't seen a virus since I completed my residency around 1996 or so. I took 2 people from my lab who are tuberculosis people who are trained in CL3 work, Fiona McIntosh and Andrienne Lupien, and they've pivoted. And they've been working in the level 3 on viruses since, you'll see in the timeline, about 2.5 months or so. And then we have partners at McGill with another lab. So if you hit next, what we did is, next slide, please, is we got MI4 funding at around the early May to start to do work, and we've applied to a CFI for funding. And next, you can see what the timeline looks like is we got certification by Public Health Agency of Canada end of March. We got viruses, thank to all the people who sent us virus, Sunnybrook National Microlab in Winnipeg, the Laboratoire de Santé Publique in Quebec, early May. Next. And then we were able to get it growing in the level 3, sequence confirm it, do drug work. We verified that we can do in vitro testing, that drugs that work kill it, drugs that don't work don't kill it. And we've had infections in vivo established already for almost 1 month. And so that all happened around the same time that, that the first case came to Quebec. So over the span of about 3 months, a tuberculosis lab became a COVID lab. And so what does that enable us to do? If you look at the next slide, now what you can see is McGill was able to obtain 13 peer-reviewed grants that need CL3 platform support from CIHR, NSERC, NRC Genome Canada, MI4. So those are, if you like, the academic teams. But if you hit next, you see that we also have 5 companies so far that are either have signed or are actually negotiating with us right now or working out the details of the protocols. I'm getting at least 1 request per week. And people are asking, are you open? And the answer is yes. Yes, we are open. So finally, I'd just like to put on the last slide a shout out to my teammates at MI4, Don Shepard, who's the director, Marie Hudson. Don and I actually got to work on the COVID ward for a day, so that's why we were wearing our face shields and masks. And in the COVID era, when we have social distancing, we have to Photoshop people to make it. So that they were not that close. This is a Photoshop and the people we're working with. And if you have any questions about what we're doing at MI4 or our COVID capacity, here's my email address. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Marcel. What I found interesting is both you and Shana talked about pivoting and taking what you were working on before and rapidly redirecting your expertise, your skills, your people, your resources. So it'd be interesting in the Q&A to think about what does it take to pivot as well. So I'll leave that as something for you guys to think about while we move through the other presentations. So moving on very quickly, we're going to hear from Mitacs and Eric Bosco, who's the Chief Business Development and Partnership Officer. When I left Canada about 20 years ago to Europe, Mitacs didn't exist. And it was a really pleasant surprise for me to come back to Canada and find out about this organization that was really trying to connect people in a way between academia and business that I thought wasn't there when I left. So I'm interested to hear what Eric has to say about what Mitacs has been involved in, particularly in COVID times. Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you for that very warm introduction. So hi, everyone. I'm very happy to get the chance to talk to all of you and talk to you about some of the exciting things we've been doing. So if we go to the next slide, please. So just in case some of you aren't familiar with Mitacs, I'm just going to very quickly say a few words about us. So basically, we're a private national not-for-profit. Our mandate is to drive innovation and increase Canadian productivity. And the way that we do this mostly is by building research collaborations between companies and not-for-profits with academia. So our strength is our network, and it's our proactive boots on the ground, the model that we have across the country. So we have 80 business development officers that are across the country in every province. And they spend their days basically in the community, meeting with companies, meeting with not-for-profits, and understanding what their challenges or dreams might be. And then because they're all connected to academia, universities, and colleges, they can identify researchers, students, equipment, basically interests on the academic side to come and work with these partners in the community. So at the end of the day, we're basically matchmakers. We bring the two sides together where on one side there's a demand and on the other side there's an interest. Next slide, please. So a few quick numbers. So we work with over 100 universities and colleges across the country. We've been around now for 21 years, but really in the last decade or more in this version of Mitacs. We've done over 50,000 projects or internships, again, in the last decade mostly. There's about 230 of us right now in over 30 offices across the country. And this year we're going to be delivering over 17,000 internships, and we're going to be investing around $250 million in innovation. Next slide, please. Oh, interesting. So there's a graphic there. So we recently received $40 million from ISED to increase our activities during the pandemic and to help companies and not-for-profits pivot. So we were originally planning to do about 10,000 of them this year. And of course, I just mentioned that we're going to be delivering 17,000. So a 70% increase this year because of the pandemic. So short-term action, but also for what we hope will be a recovery coming in the next few months. And the help or the pivot that we do with the companies is basically to help them develop new products or new markets. In many cases, they have new opportunities, or in many cases, they need to basically reinvent themselves because, you know, their market has shifted or possibly disappeared. So we can help with that. Also, things like product and process optimization, exploring new technologies or processes, marketing and commercialization as well. Next slide, please. I'm going to go into more detail here. So there's a number of actions that we've taken so far that are related to COVID, and there's more that we will be launching in the next few weeks and through the fall. So the first one is very early on, we did a call for projects that are COVID related. And for those projects, we did a couple of things. First of all, we offered a fast review. So normally it takes us 4 to 6 weeks to review a project. In this case, we were able to do it in 1 or 2 weeks. So again, we were trying to get these projects off the ground very quickly. And for those projects where the partner was an SME, we also offered a discount. So normally the company pays half of the cost of a research project and we supply the other half. So for this call, we had basically the companies put in a quarter of the cost and we put in the other 75%. So we did this actually before we got the new money from the federal government, and we expected that we might get interest for about 200 projects. We got over 1,300 of these projects, so it was a big success. And thankfully, the $40 million came in around that time, so we were able to go over the 200 that we were originally planning. The other thing that we did is once we got the $40 million and we saw the interest out there, and of course, we interact a lot with companies, and we were seeing companies struggle financially, and some of them, you know, wanting to delay projects or in some cases actually cancel projects. So we decided to extend the SME discount that we were offering, but beyond COVID-19 related projects, just to keep innovation flowing in the country. So we opened this up, and we received over 2,000 of these projects. And one of the requirement for having access to this discount, again, was only for the SMEs. and it was only for projects where the students would start working on them this summer, right? So we're all concerned about our students, so we wanted to make sure that they were gainfully employed during the summer. So that was a requirement of that call. So again, another very successful call. Next slide. So we then, we started offering some projects or some programming that goes beyond the usual research projects that we typically do. So we call these our business strategy internships. And what's interesting here is that the idea actually came from the Souther School at UBC. So they basically pitched us and said, you know, we know of all of these companies that we work with, especially small ones, that are struggling right now, right? Like they need to pivot new markets, they need to reinvent themselves, and they don't really have the skill set for doing that, and they didn't plan for it or budget for it, because of course no one saw this coming. So wouldn't it be great if we could take some of our business students or MBAs and send them into these companies to help them with this work? So we thought that was a great idea. So now we've launched that across the country. So we've only launched this a few weeks ago, and we already have commitments from business schools across the country for close to 2,000 of these internships that should be taking place in the next few months. So that looks pretty encouraging. We're also going to be expanding, this model to law students that are going to be helping companies with their IP strategy and roadmap. And we're also going to be doing some for marketing as well. Another program that in this case was suggested to us by Mila in Montreal here is our Accelerate Assessment internships for artificial intelligence. So basically the issue here that they're trying to solve, which is one that we've been trying to solve as well, is, you know, AI has become such a big buzzword that all of the companies think that they need it and they all want to explore it. The problem is there's only so many experts across the country. So it's hard to find, you know, the bandwidth or the attention to be able to look at all of these companies and see whether or not AI actually is needed for them. And if so, what does that look like? So the idea from Mila was, well, let's send them some qualified students under proper supervision on a short internship. So these are 8-week internships, and it's not for doing research. It's basically for doing an assessment. So the students go in, they understand what the company is all about, what data they've got, whether or not AI should be used, and they basically come out of the 8 weeks with a roadmap, you know, and then we, in the ecosystem collectively, we can look at that and we can figure out what the need is and how we can best help the company. So we're in the process of launching this right now. And we will also be expanding this model to cybersecurity, quantum, and indigenous projects as well for similar reasons. The other one that we've done is we created placements for 2,000 research training awards. So these are summer research projects that take place at the university. So this is, again, not standard for us. Typically what we do are research collaborations between academia and industry. But again, you know, we're all concerned about the students. We want to keep them busy, gainfully employed, developing new skill sets. And we want to keep them, you know, basically earning money during the summer at a time when it's very difficult to find summer jobs. So we launched this program a couple of months ago, and we're going to be doing about 2,000 of these. And the interesting thing with this one is that the idea came from U of T. So you see here a bit of a trend here where the last 3 programs were all suggestions from partners of ours externally. So if you have any ideas that you think would fit with us, we're always interested in hearing about new ideas. Next slide, please. So, I'm getting near the end here of the new stuff. So there's a program for industrial postdoc fellowships that we run every year. So we've launched a COVID related version. And again, we offered a fast track review because we want to try and get all of these projects off the ground as fast as possible. And we also offered a slightly better matching of the funding than our usual model. And we received 87 applications that are 1 year each. And the last one is that we have our Canadian Science Policy Fellowship Program, by which we embed postdocs and faculty into government departments for a year to work on policy related to research. So we launched a COVID-19 related call, which we've just closed recently, and I hear that we have some pretty interesting numbers and projects there. Next slide, please. So at the end of the day, I mean, there's really two main reasons why we're doing all of these things. The first one is, you know, we all invested a lot collectively over the last decade into innovation, trying to grow innovation across the country. And in our case, and in other cases, you know, by building partnerships between academia and industry. And so we really don't want to lose that momentum, right? We work too hard for it. And we also think that, you know, it's going to cost us less in the long run to subsidize some of these projects so that, you know, companies continue to innovate rather than letting it slow down and trying to rebuild it in a year or two. So that's the first reason. The second one is, and a large reason why the government gave us the $40 million, is that we don't want to lose a generation of talented students. Right? Like we've seen that before, and we don't want to see this happen again. The pandemic will pass, and we'll need to have these students ready to help with the recovery. So a big part of what we're trying to do is short-term and try and help the students. And of course, by keeping our students gainfully employed, well, it helps them pay their university fees in the fall, which, you know, helps the universities as well. Next slide. Now I'm 12 minutes here, so I'm supposed to be over time. So maybe I'll skip the 3 examples I've got here. I assume that the slide deck will be shared with everyone on the call. So maybe we can go straight to the last slide, which is basically where I take a few seconds here just to thank our funding partners. Of course, we put money into all of these projects, and the money comes from the federal government, from through ISED, but we also have financial support from every single province across the country and one territory. So the Yukon just joined us about a month ago. We need to add it to the slide here. And so I just want to make sure that, that we thank them properly, because without them, we wouldn't be able to do the work that we do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. Very interesting, and you know, certainly, I think you know, I've lived and worked in 6 different countries around the world, and certainly Canada is known as having an incredible depth of talent and people who have great skills. So it's great that this is sustaining that through the crisis, as well as putting them to work. Really, you say. You said something about the you know, waiting for the recovery or when the recovery comes. I would say the recovery is now, and it's great that we've got these programs that allocate and give people the chance to implement the recovery from right now. So thank you very much for that, and I hope people will take advantage of this program, because it really is quite fantastic. Moving on very quickly, because as we are in a time schedule, we're moving, Eric has been kind of the bridge, which is what Mitacs does. We're moving from academia more to government and the public sector. So the next number of speakers are going to be from the public sector, from the government side. So first off, we've got Leanne Wan, who's the strategist for outreach and partnerships for the Innovators Experience branch. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Leanne. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you, everyone, for having me. I will try and move quickly through my slides, and we can catch up a little bit. So my name is Leanne, and I'm part of the outreach team with the Innovators Experience branch at Innovation Canada. So we can just move on to the next slide. So a big part of what we do at IXB is this business benefits finder. So you can find that online at innovation.canada.ca. And basically what it is a one-stop shop kind of portal that lets you find all of the programs that are available to help business. So these are federal government, provincial government, territorial, and also some nonprofits. Mitacs is also listed on there as well. So when a business is looking for finance, support, funding, expert advice, export advice, and that sort of thing, they can come to the Business Benefit Finder, and I'll just get you to go down to the next slide, and find all of those things in one place. So what we've done in terms of COVID is to add over 150 COVID specific supports. So on any given day, we have close to 1,000 supports. Since March, we've added 150 that are COVID specific. Some of those are the ones you've heard about in the media, the CCRAs and that sort of thing, but there are other more specific supports that you might qualify for. And to find out if you would qualify for them, you just have to visit the site, and I'll ask you to go down to the next slide. And tell us your story, essentially. This takes about 2 minutes. There are some pre-populated questions that you'll see in there. Where are you? What kind of funding are you looking, or what kind of support are you looking for? What type of business do you have? There are categories in there for all different types of businesses, including research. How many people are working with you and that sort of thing. And then you just ask to see your results. I'll get you to go down to the next slide. And this is essentially what your results will look like rather. So rather than having to comb through all of the government websites, all of the program websites and read about the programs, try and understand whether or not you qualify, we've brought them together for you based on your answers to those few questions. And then we've simplified it even more. So at a glance, you can see whether it looks like something that will fit. You can click through on those, get a little bit more information, and then decide if you want to pursue it. Some of the great features on the platform now are that you can save the story. So once you've gone through it once, even relative to COVID supports, you can save them, and you don't have to go through the story each time. You don't have to answer the questions each time, unless your circumstances change. It's saved there for you. You'll automatically get a new list of what's available to you. You can also choose to sign in, save your profile. And this is great because it saves all kinds of time. We'll send you an email when things change, when there's a new program, a new deadline, if anything comes up that might fit your circumstances, you'll just get an email from us. You don't have to go back in and take a look. And when you do look through these, we call these doves, which is your results, you can favorite those as well. So you can choose to go back to those, take a look around, see what fits, come back, read more about it later. So that's the platform essentially. One of the other services we offer across Canada are our innovation advisors. So we can go to the next slide. So the innovation advisors are actually individuals. So they're former employees or former entrepreneurs or private sector employees who work with us on your behalf. So they are working one-on-one with companies and individuals, entrepreneurs across the country to help guide them through that process. Some of the application processes, some of understanding whether these programs fit for you can be a little bit overwhelming. So they really work one-on-one with people to help them understand. At certain levels, when you qualify for additional support, there's a whole kind of 18-month service plan that you might qualify for. So they can provide advice, they can help you navigate the landscape and make connections, which is ultimately going to get you where you need to go. And in terms of COVID, fun fact where the innovation advisors are concerned on the next slide, when the government issued the call to action to companies across the country to respond with goods and services that were critical to the fight against COVID, these innovation advisors across the country, these smiling faces that you see right now, pivoted their workforce. So that word pivot is becoming a big part of our reality now. They all pivoted what they were doing so that they could work with those companies directly, quickly, find out what they could provide, how they could help make it happen so that we could get those things into the hands of Canadians more quickly. And that's it. That's the platform in a nutshell.
Great. Thank you, Leanne. Just like to mention that, yes, as Leanne has said, all these slides are, there's a link in the Slack channel that you can follow on with the slides right now or go see them afterwards if there's other information you want to pick up. So they're available to you. Also, I want to say, if you're holding your question back, please put it into the Slack as now. We're collating them now, so you don't have to wait till we get to the Q&A, but we're really encouraging you to put your questions up there so we can have a good Q&A as well. So moving on to the next presenter, we now have from Innovation Solutions Canada, a little more of a procurement point of view, is Patrick Séguin, who's the social media and marketing strategist for Innovative Solutions Canada. So over to you, Patrick.
Thank you very much, Christine. So hello, everyone. Just to start, thanks to the CanCOVID team for having us out here today. Lots of insightful information that we're getting out of the speakers. So I'm going to chat a bit about our program. So we're actually a partnered branch of Innovators Experience Branch, which we just heard about from Leanne. So what I'm going to do is give a bit of a global perspective on Innovative Solutions Canada, what we have to offer, and then go into the work that we've been doing related to COVID-19. So if we jump to the next slide. So our goal is to accelerate the Canadian companies' journey to market. So we do that by helping you start, grow, and scale up. So this goes for businesses of any size. And we do that through two distinct streams, which I'll go into a little more later on. So we have our challenge stream, which is an early stage R&D, and then late stage testing, which is our testing stream. So if we hop over to the next slide here, a few reasons on why to apply. So you have the opportunity to land government as your first client through our program. Also, any innovation that you create through us, you retain your IP rights, you maintain equity fully in your company, and all the funding that you receive is 100% non-repayable. So it's done through grants or contracts, it isn't loans. So now if we hop over to the next slide. So for the challenge stream, we can go to the next one as well. So a few of the basics. So it's actually a competitive process to meet specific government needs. So what we do is we actually partner with 20 federal departments, and they issue specific challenges to Canadian businesses for them to solve. So whether it be towards direct needs for their department or related to their mandate. So they come through us, challenges stay open for a few months, and then businesses can apply with a solution to these challenges. And this is for early stage R&D, so TRL levels 1 through 6. So for those that aren't familiar with technology readiness levels, a TRL 1 would basically be a company that's still in the idea phase of their prototype. And then a TRL 6 would mean that you have a prototype, but it hasn't been tested in a real life setting yet. And so I'm not going to go into all the phases, but just a brief overview. So for the companies that actually get accepted and get engaged into the first phase, so you actually receive up to $150,000 to develop a proof of concept. And then once you've completed that phase, you have the opportunity to go into phase 2, where you can receive up to $1 million to actually develop an actual prototype. So next slide, please. And actually, since March, we've really focused our attention on COVID-19, and we've issued 5 specific challenges to Canadian businesses to help in the battle against COVID-19. And these are all closed at the moment, but these have been a tremendous success. We received a ton of applications, and actually 2 of them, we've already awarded contracts to several companies. So the first one, top left, so the manufacturing of N95 respirators and surgical masks, we've had 3 companies that have received funding and are jumping into phase 1 of developing their proof of concept. And then for the point of care home diagnostic kit, we've had 4 companies that have received funding. And we are hoping to have a few more challenges go out in the coming months, so stay tuned for that as well. Next slide, please. So for the testing stream, we can just jump to the next slide as well. So if anyone's familiar with the Build in Canada Innovation Program, that's basically what the testing stream is. So the BCIP closed a few years ago. And what it is, it focuses on late stage innovations. So it's really an open competition where businesses can submit their innovation. And then from there, they can actually, if they're eligible, they go into a pool of eligible innovations, and they can actually then partner with government or academia, et cetera, to actually have their innovations tested. So we relaunched as the testing stream this spring. And so what we did, so when it was the BCIP, it actually wasn't theme-based, but with everything going on with COVID-19, if we go to the next slide, so we issued a COVID-19 call for prototypes. We kept it open for about 6 weeks. So businesses or just individuals could submit their innovations. We broke it down into 2 fields. So we had the medical category and then the non-medical category. And once again, we received a ton of applications towards this. And how it works, it is closed now. However, all of the innovations that were screened in and actually passed the eligibility, so they're actually featured on our website right now. So anyone can really go on the website, look through the innovations, and if they find anything that they're interested in partnering up with or testing, they can contact us. So like I said before, it can be federal government departments, it can be provinces, it can be cities, even academia, etc. So they contact us and we can partner them with the right innovation. And then from there, the businesses can receive up to $550,000 to test their innovations and get to market faster. So now if we go to the next slide here, that's all for me. So I went over it rather quickly. If you're looking for more information, feel free to check out our website. You can also email us at solutions@canada.ca. And also worth noting, we just recently launched our own LinkedIn page. So that's Innovative Solutions Canada. So we'll be posting a ton about program updates and also whenever we have funding opportunities going out. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Patrick. Very interesting, sort of that connecting that early stage work to the TRL 7 to 9 stuff, and I'm very familiar with technology readiness levels because they came from NASA. So being on the space side, and we know, we call it the gap of death, actually. Getting from a TRL 6 to a TRL 7 is sometimes the hardest step in innovation. So the fact that your program is also really giving support for that sort of shift on is really important. So thanks for that. And you know, again, moving on, this is Explore IP is going to be up now. Frédéric Papillon, who's the Senior Outreach Officer, is going to take us through this program. Go ahead.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much, Christine, and thank you also all attendees. Explore IP, we are part of Performance and Partnership and Innovation Canada, the third cousin of Innovators Experience Branch and Innovative Solutions Canada. Can we go to the next slide, please? So what Explore IP is we are officially Canada's intellectual property marketplace. We are one of the key initiatives that came out of the National Intellectual Property Strategy launched back in 2018. And the reason why Explore IP was created was mainly to improve the way companies find and identify existing intellectual property that is held by Canada's public sector so that these businesses can quickly access that research for licensing purposes and to commercialize it. So at the moment, it's also a very good way for all of Canada's public sector institutions to feature their research expertise. We currently have 41 organizations from Canada's public sector, including federal departments, agencies, crown corporations, universities, and research hospitals. Any of those organizations that generate IP. So 41 of them have a completed profile in Explore IP and uploaded portfolio. As I speak right now, a 42nd organization is being added. And we also have had discussions recently with about half a dozen others for them to join Explore IP. So if there are any representative from other public sector institutions on the line today, I just also want to convey that Explore IP is open for everyone from the public sector to join. So you can contact us. The email address will be given on the last slide to know the onboarding process. I just also want to mention that Explore IP is free to use for all users and also all public sector institutions. So since creation and since adding also a 42nd organization, we have an overall patent portfolio of 3,300 patent families, representing about 12,000 patents. The launch of the tool was on August 1st last year by Minister Baines. And since that launch, over 220 users came on the IP marketplace and have contacted public sector organization to basically discuss a possible licensing opportunity or to discuss collaboration. So this means that Explore IP is generating interesting results for Canada's innovation landscape with users finding usable IP and interesting IP right away. Explore IP was launched almost a year ago, and since launch, we just been adding some functionalities to make the tool easier to use by our IP holders, the public sector institutions and users. And at the moment, all those updates have been made. We are going through a maintenance and consultation phase until April 2021. What we want to do during this consultation is we want to expand Explore IP to add other forms of IP. So we want to to the current, patent portfolios, we want to add some, I would say, traditional forms of IP, such as trademarks, maybe some industrial designs, and also some, I would say, non-traditional forms of IP, for example, information on the lab facilities, research notes, software codes, etc. Can we go on the next slide, please? So more pertaining to this panel today, XplorIP also has pivoted its activities during the pandemic. So when it was launched, XplorIP was organized by the International Patent Classification Codes. So we have 5 main technology categories. And during the pandemic, we added a new one, COVID-19 dedicated technology category. And the objective for that was to basically highlight any technologies within our portfolio that can have a direct applications to fight the pandemic. Can we please move to the next slide? So with the help of all of our partners on XplorIP and with their close collaboration, and we managed to pull together a very interesting patent pool of over 42 inventions from 10 public sector institutions that have a direct, I would say, application to the pandemic. And of course, like this current list is not static, it is ever expanding. So in any new organization that will join that do have such technology will be added there. So the launch of this tool was made on April 27th. And it was just basically a very good, I would say, a testimony of the collaboration and the agility of all of our partners that featured their IP portfolio in XplorIP. This basically, this launch was very successful, and it has created, I would say, very, timely opportunities for any companies to find technologies with a potential application to fight the pandemic, and right away discuss potential application, commercialization, or licensing opportunities. Can we please move to the next slide? As we said, we spent the last year also adding features to improve how XplorIP is being, I would say, searched and used by every visitors. The newest function is the signing function. What it does, it enables everyone to create a user login and profile. So what anyone can do is to come on XplorIP, register and sign in. You can save your search preference. For example, if you're interested in infectiology, well, this would be like your saved category. And every time we add a new patent in that technology category, you will receive a notification. So this is very interesting as well. And also your profile will allow you to pre-populate your contact request form. So whenever you find an interest as a user or as a business, whenever you find an interesting intellectual property, well, the form is already pre-populated, so you can contact the IP holder right away to discuss licensing or collaboration. Let's go to the next and last slide, please. So this is who we are, myself, Frederic, and my colleague Petra Hudakova, who's the project manager of XplorIP. We took this picture before social distancing was a thing. This was during our last appearance late February at the Public Sector Innovation Show. So of course, today we wouldn't be able to do this, but I just want to also leave you on this slide with the direct website, if you'd like to have a look, canada.ca/XplorIP. And also, I will also invite you to contact us either to request a demonstration of the tool. I know we're very short in time, so we can provide customized demonstration to your organization and or to be onboarded. And also, I want to remind you all to go and create your own user profile. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the session.
Great. Thank you very much, Fred. Amazing, and congratulations on getting this site up in the thick of a pandemic. And you know, what's interesting is all the work that has been going on has suddenly become so much more important. So the fact that we have, you know, a marketplace for IP, and we can highlight that there's COVID related IP that's available. But we've heard from Shayna about, you know, the work her lab has been doing that suddenly becomes so important. And I think, you know, what we're seeing is a lot of work has gone in that is suddenly so important. So we're going to go on to our final presentation, and I'd like to welcome Cecilia Basic, who's an intellectual property advisor with the Canadian Intellectual Property Office. So Cecilia, off to you to finish it off for us.
Okay, thank you very much, Christine. It is really a pleasure to be here today and to have an opportunity to introduce you to the support programs that CIPO has for innovators in Canada. As many of you may know, CIPO is a special operating agency of ISED. So I am familiar with a number of the programs that my ISED colleagues have talked about today. And we work in conjunction very closely with our ISED colleagues. So while we're perhaps best known for the agency in Canada that examines and grants formal patent rights, formal intellectual property rights, whether they're patents or trademarks or industrial designs. One of our mandates is also to bring awareness of the effective use of IP to Canadian innovators. And so I'm one of a team of intellectual property advisors across Canada, and our role is to work directly with innovators to help them solve any of their bring awareness about the role of intellectual property, which my previous speakers, I think, have already alluded to. So next slide, please. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to just sort of give the audience sort of a slam dunk on the best practices in industry academic collaborations. So as we hear, you know, Shana and Marcel talk about all of the fascinating work that is going on at U of T, and I'm a proud U of T alum from chemistry. Behind all of that innovation and behind all of those partnerships on the funding agreements that are secured through the various programs and the relationships that are built are a series of intellectual property agreements. And I really like the title of this session today, Where the Rubber Hits the Road, because these agreements really are where the rubber hits the road. For any industry academic collaboration whose goal is to bring a product to market. And so I thought I would just give Cecilia Basic's top tips of how to deal with these. Having done technology transfer in university and government environments, I'm going to give you my take on it. So first of all, don't put this behind. Don't leave it as an afterthought. Contact your intellectual property professional now, whether that's your technology transfer office, your research office, maybe you've got legal counsel. This is not something to be left as an afterthought, especially in the fast-paced environment that is COVID. So know that behind all of the exciting work that is going on at the institutions, there are teams of intellectual property professionals that are making sure that the agreements are being put in place. In any industry academic collaboration, the first agreement that is executed is what's called a non-disclosure agreement. And this is the type of agreement that should be executed, signed, before you share any enabling information with a collaborator. An NDA is a starting point of academic industry collaboration, but a starting point only. It does put boundaries around what your confidential information can be used for, and is generally a first point of engagement. Once you've reached the point where you realize there's a collaboration interest here and you want to move forward with your partner, some form of a collaboration agreement needs to be put in place. And you can call it a sponsorship agreement, you can call it a development agreement, but at the end of the day, a collaboration agreement is a comprehensive agreement that forms the critical legal framework around the collaboration. And I'm sorry, but you need to have a comprehensive framework around your collaboration. There are many, many aspects to this agreement. Not enough time to delve into those here today, but importantly, this is the agreement that will define who owns and who controls the intellectual property outcomes of your collaboration. I'm going to repeat that. This is the agreement that will determine who owns and who controls the intellectual property outcomes of your collaboration. And that's why it's important that this not be addressed after the fact. So, material transfer agreements. I heard Marcel talk about shipping viruses around the country. If you do not have a collaboration agreement in place that speaks particularly to material use, please, please, before you slap that label on your dry ice package to FedEx to move that virus from point A to point B, you really do need to have a material transfer agreement in place. These are rapid agreements that can be fired off, again, by your respective intellectual property office, whoever is managing these for your organization. These agreements actually define who owns and who controls the IP outcomes from the use of the materials. So often overlooked, but these are critical to have in place before they're shipped. In any of these academic collaborations, please be sure that you define roles, clearly articulate, and I do mean in writing, and define who is bringing what to the table. Keep track of all of the personnel involved, including outside contractors, what they have contributed and where they conducted their work. This is actually going to be important in determining inventorship rights, inventorship in any patent filings. It will dictate copyrights, and data rights, all sorts of formal intellectual property rights. Be sure to carefully record and keep track of all data, materials, devices, etc., that you do share with your collaborator. This is your background intellectual property, and it will dictate the outcomes of the new intellectual property that arises from the collaboration, what we call the foreground intellectual property. So understanding what you're walking into the relationship with is very, very important. Finally, the thing that's ultimately going to be considered is how are you going to formalize this intellectual property? Is it going to be a copyright? Are you going to file for patents? What are you going to do? So who, what, where, and how. When's good too. Trust me, dates become really important in this business. And one final point on this slide is to please, you have to understand you need to file for your patents before you publish. Otherwise, you will compromise some of your intellectual property rights worldwide and your ability to secure patents. So that's my little primer on best practices for collaborations. I do also want to take this opportunity to let you know that CIPO has recently launched a pilot project that will allow accelerated examinations of COVID-related inventions. This can be requested for new or existing patent applications. There are no additional fees to request this accelerated examination. The pilot project is going to be limited to 50 applicants. And will remain in effect until otherwise indicated by CIPO. And you can find details of this on our website. You just have to search CIPO COVID Accelerated Examination. So next slide, please. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I am one of a team of intellectual property advisors that is located across Canada. Again, we work very closely with our other ICED colleagues and the other advisors who are implementing programs. And again, it's a part of our outreach program. So next slide, please. We also have on our website a wide variety of resources on the foundations of intellectual property and building an intellectual property strategy. Again, I'm one of the advisors, and we are available to meet with clients one-on-one, innovators one-on-one. So please feel free to reach out to me, and I can be happy to work with you along with the regional IPA advisor to sit down and discuss the IP situation that you're facing. And it is all free of charge. So again, my contact information is here for email, and the website addresses are there as well. And that's it.
Great. Thank you very much, Cecilia. Absolutely. I think in many of my lives, whether it was in big corporate technology or when I advise and consult with startups, one of the first questions I have is, do we have an NDA? Because that allows us to be both comfortable that we know the bounds of our conversation and that we're both protected. So absolutely, it's key in almost any relationship, whether it's industry to industry or academia to industry, it's very key. So I thank you very much for that little primer and setting that out is very clear steps. So excellent. I want to thank all the presenters for all their information they've provided. We're moving into the Q&A aspect of this. Please, again, we're using Slack to collate the questions. We're going to curate and select a few because we're a little bit behind time, so we don't quite have as much time. But what we're committing to is, if you do put the questions in Slack, if we get to them now, that's great, and I hope we have a discussion around it. If not, we will make sure that there is some sort of way to answer that question either in the Slack channel itself or through private messages through the Slack channel. So please, we're using Slack as our way to collect and collate and record all the questions from this session. So please use that. We have got a couple questions here. So first of all, I'm going to broadly put one out to all the presenters in terms of, and I have given them a little bit of warning, in this pandemic era, where have collaboration either helped you to accelerate what you're doing, because we're all talking about speed, or where would you hope collaboration would take you to the next level? So give that a broad question for everybody to think about. And Shana, maybe if I pick on you first to get it rolling, where has collaboration with your lab Prime been really crucial to your progress?
It's been absolutely critical, but I've just seen an extraordinary level of collaboration. I mean, maybe this is another thing that's unprecedented, I think, about the time that we're in and the way that people are really coming together to work together. I mean, the work that I told you about, we needed an antibody from this lab, we needed a model protein from another lab, we needed pseudotype viral particles from this lab across the street, we needed to get studies up and running in our level 3 lab, and the answer was always yes. You know, people answered the emails right away, and that allowed us to jumpstart everything rather than waiting, you know, and when things were really locked down, it wasn't possible to get reagents across the border. And so the collaboration, I've seen this in my work and many, many other people's projects related to COVID, people have just been there and ready to provide whatever support they can. And so I think this is one of the things, you know, I'm from the US originally. I was immediately struck when I moved to Canada by how collaborative and supportive Canadian scientists are. And I think we're really seeing that in the response to, you know, having scientific collaborations come together and really speed towards new solutions.
Great. Patrick, any thoughts from your point from the innovation or Innovative Solutions Canada? I'll get it right eventually here, but you know, in terms of what have you seen in your area on collaboration, and what has spurred collaboration in your area?
Absolutely. Thanks, Christine. Well, collaboration's been critical for us because with everything going on, so we've been able to put out 5 COVID-related challenges. And for us, usually the challenge development, so coordinating with those departments, figuring out their needs, usually it can take even sometimes months to develop those challenges. So what we want to do is have like a really quick turnaround. So we got in touch with, like, NRC was one of the departments that put out COVID-related challenges. So we got in touch with them, figured out what our needs were, how we could get, you know, innovators developing, you know, products and services that could help in the fight against COVID, and do that in an urgent fashion as well. So with everything going on and with a lot of the world stopping for a while, we wanted to really, you know, buckle down and be able to still provide funding for those businesses that were struggling during the pandemic. So yeah, obviously collaboration's been huge for us.
I'm going to give it a little spin and pass it both to Eric and Marcel. Both of you, with the platform as well as Mitacs in general, has been a lot of supporting and engaging more collaboration. In this pandemic, have you been surprised by any collaborations that you never thought would happen? But because of the area we're in, suddenly it's like, oh, wow, I never would have worked with this person or this organization. But suddenly the new dynamics has opened up different territory. Has anything happened like that for either one of you?
Eric, do you want to go first?
I'll let you go first.
Sure. Well, MI4 is about fostering collaboration, but even then I've been shocked by some of the completely random ideas that have come to mind. One of the groups at McGill University, who are structural biologists who try to figure out how enzymes work, said, how can we actually make the reagents so that we have a made in Canada diagnostic test? So really, they were not viral PCR people, but they just said, if you need enzymes, we'll make enzymes. So it's been kind of that way. And I think a lot of people have had that approach. I had the same experience as Shayna. People have been extremely constructive and extremely helpful. When we needed the level 3 to have an ultracentrifuge, and we asked people, does anybody have one? People said, take ours and we'll worry about it later. So at the level of equipment, at the level of thinking, at the level of getting together, it's been really actually very heartening. And to me, it's brought out the best of our academic community. And it's offered great new opportunities to meet people who we didn't know.
Eric?
Yeah, so I was ready for the original version of the question, but so this one, I mean, Mitacs is all about partnerships and collaborations. I mean, that's the model that we build. Everything is a collaboration between, you know, a company or not-for-profit and then academia. And then Mitacs operates on the same level where we keep partnering with other groups across the country in the ecosystem. So it's kind of what we do on a regular basis. We actually did quite a few partnerships. I mean, I mentioned of the different things that we've launched, 3 of those came from partners of ours that just had ideas and we thought they were great. And so we've built on that. We've also, I didn't mention it, but also in the calls that we did, there were also smaller calls that were attached to it with organizations like AgeWell, Innovate BC, ACOA, NBIF, and a few others that I'm forgetting right now, where they added on additional money to make it even more attractive so we could build even more projects. Plus, of course, they distributed it through their channels. And of course, you know, the federal government in the first week or very early in March, I was on the phone with them about the fact that Mitacs could do something with regards to the pandemic and the recovery. And very quickly, that was a very constructive conversation that led to the additional funding. So definitely we did a lot of partnerships and collaborations, and it's definitely part of our DNA. Now, do any of them surprise me? No, I think everyone is in it for, you know, everyone really cares. Everyone wanted to move very quickly, and it was just an opportunity for a number of us who knew each other to just come together and roll up our sleeves and get things done. So none surprised me, but I'm very happy to see them, that we collectively were all interested in going forward.
Cool, great. All right, we're going to go from a sort of a holistic question to something that's a little more, you know, mechanistic in the sense of, we've been talking a lot about IP, the IP patents that are available. So I'm going to cue you up. It'll be Fred, Cecilia, and then Shayna. In terms of, as holders of IP or ability to have, someone goes on, finds, this is a really interesting patent for me, or I can see where I can commercialize this IP, and I've identified the IP holder and the IP. What do I do then? What do I do next? So Fred, somebody is on the marketplace, identifies a patent. What do they do?
Yeah, well, with the Explore IP tool, that person can contact the IP owners directly. So when that user has found that technology through Explore IP, there is a form that is either pre-populated if the person has filled up their sign-in profile, or if it's a first-time visitor, the sign-in, the contact request doesn't take long to fill up. And then that basically information request goes directly to the person within the organization that holds the IP that would have the authority to start negotiating either terms for a license or ways of collaboration. So this is the first step, is to basically contact the patent holder right away, and through a small message, maybe just highlight what is the nature of the collaboration sought, and the email goes directly to the mailbox of the person that's in authority to answer and reply. So within hours, contact is made and discussion can start.
Okay. Just a quick question. We've got a question here in the poll. Could you just quickly, like in one sentence, tell us what the relationship is between Explore IP and the Patent Collective Pilot Program? Do you know anything about that?
They were both launched on August 1st last year by Minister Baines. They're both initiatives from the National IP Strategy, but they're two separate entities for now, but they are collaborations, like upcoming collaborations that are being discussed.
Okay, so could we say that if they have a question about that and they contacted you, you could direct them to the right person?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. So I'm going to go to Cecilia with my original question of what do you do now, because there's contacting the IP holder. I've done this a couple of times in the aerospace areas, but there's things about the conditions of use, the royalties or the payment. There's also the engineering that goes around. How, is this an applicable solution? So what kind of advice would you give to people in terms of the next steps once they've identified a potential patent that's of interest?
So this is particularly a patent that's of interest. Well, the first piece of advice that I give is to actually read the claims of the patent. Because the claims of the patent are what is protected by that patent. And then to sit down and ask yourself, what am I bringing to the table that is different, that's okay, it's 6 o'clock here, Halifax time. Okay, could I just put that out there? What is different about, what are you bringing to the table that's different from what they've already laid claim to? And this is an important thing to understand, because you have to bring something that's different enough from what they've already covered if you're looking at wanting to build upon what they have. And in that situation, you're probably going to require a license to that patent. If it does have technology in it that you do want to build upon, you're very probably looking at a licensing situation. Now, it could also be an opportunity for collaboration as well in developing your new solution or your new improvement to what's already out there. So, and that would be my starting point. I get to give it depends on the details of the situation. I hang out with IP lawyers a lot, and that's their answer. It depends. But that is if you do find an existing patent that's out there. And then definitely lock in that NDA before you start talking in any detail about your technology and how you feel will enhance it.
Okay, so figure out what they're bringing to the table, what you can bring to the table as an enhancement, and absolutely start with an NDA. Shayna, as a lab, as the director of an institute that owns patents and looking for commercialization and business partners, what would you say is if somebody approached you, what would you say is their next steps?
Yeah, I mean, people approach us all the time about technologies that we've developed and patents that we filed, and I think inventors always like to hear from people that have an interest in what they've done, and so that direct contact, I think, is a great way to get the ball rolling. We typically have an initial conversation. I'm fortunate that there's somebody in my group who part of their mandate is to handle all of our IP filings and really to have at their fingertips, what's there and what is maybe spoken for and what's available. And so I partner with that person and we have these conversations. We can take it to a certain point. We can talk about the technology. We can talk about what we've envisioned doing with it. We can give them a sense of, you know, what application areas are available for a given technology. But there always comes a point where we then have to hand off to our tech transfer office, innovations and partnerships office, IPO, and then they take it the rest of the way, or they kind of take the next conversation and then they bring us back in, and it's a stepwise process. But it's all about figuring out, you know, what the needs of an organization is that is interested in the piece of IP, and then what we have to offer. And very often then the discussion goes, and absolutely, you know, NDAs are important, because as you start going, sometimes then there's new ideas about things that you could do as kind of the next generation technology, and then collaborations, they kind of take on a life of their own above and beyond the IP that's already there. But I think, you know, my main thought is just that, you know, there's never any barrier to just writing somebody an email or picking up the phone and trying to get in touch to just talk about what's there and what's available.
Great. All right, great advice, and yeah, great to just start conversations. Unfortunately, we're getting to the end of this, and there's a couple of things we want to do to continue this on, but I want to thank the presenters and for their time, their thoughtfulness, and their insights. It's been great, fantastic. Many of you, I'm meeting you for the first time, and it's great for me to hear from you as well. This is the start of a conversation, and I made the reference to a taster flight for wine tasting earlier. Well, with any wine tasting, there also is the idea of pairings. You know, what goes with the wine that we need to do, and part of this operation is about starting to create those pairings. So Kimberly is going to take us through a little bit of how we can create matches or identify people who have things to offer versus people who need skills or whatever. So we're going to set up a couple polls and stuff that Kimberly will take us through, because she knows how it works. But I want to thank everybody. I hope this is the start of a series. So we also want to hear from you in terms of what topics in the industry collaboration under the COVID-19 umbrella would people like us to put together as the next seminar. So please let us know that. But it's been a pleasure, and I hope it's been useful to everybody. So thank you very much. And it's 6 p.m. in Halifax. It's getting to be 5 p.m. here. So yeah, thank you very much for keeping in with us. Thanks. Kimberly, over to you.
And thanks to you, Christine, because you were an absolutely excellent moderator, and you kept the conversation flowing. I really appreciated that. Yes, as she mentioned, any unanswered questions in the Slack channel, hopefully we can have a conversation on Slack around them. Please feel free, if there's anything that occurs to you after this event, to go ahead and post it there as well. And again, we'll try to answer it collectively. We have posted links to 2 forms that you can fill out. So there's one that is if you have a need of something, you can share what your need is. And the other is if you have something to offer, you can share what that is. We did send them in advance, and it looks like we've got about 20 people that have already filled it out. We will post a link to the spreadsheet where it's being filled in those Slack channels. So this is an opportunity for you to take the bull by the horns and to introduce yourself. If you see that someone has a need that you could fill, please feel free to reach out and contact them, and vice versa. If you have something on offer and there's a match to be made there, you can approach them. Their email addresses are in the spreadsheet, but you can also use Slack. Slack is a great communication tool because they've got that direct messaging feature. So that's a good way to approach people. And I encourage everyone to go ahead and use it that way. That's what it's there for. It's meant to be communication. So don't be shy and don't be scared. It's a lot easier to approach someone in a direct message than it is to go up to them at a conference. So take advantage while we're still in this socially distant time. And speaking of which, next Friday on July 31st, CanCOVID is also hosting a mixer event for their membership. And so that's another way that you can meet people across the country that you might not have met otherwise. If you get our newsletters every week, the login information will be posted in that newsletter. So there you go. And then finally, before you sign off, we have this little survey for you. Future webinar topics, we were brainstorming and just came up with some to ask. It's multiple answer is available, so if several of them are interesting to you, please feel free to go ahead and click multiples. And then it's just a little question of if you were aware of Explorer IP before today, or if you've used it and things like that. And then finally, just mostly just for me to be able to put my contact information, and if you have any feedback to share with me. But I did frame it in the form of a question. So great panel if you liked it, or if you didn't find it helpful, you can let me know that too. I have a thick skin and I don't mind. And I really do encourage you to send me your feedback, not only about this panel, but about CanCOVID generally, because we are membership driven and we want to make sure that everybody is getting out of it what they would like. But really, we are only as great as our members. So as much as you participate is really super the best. And you know, once you've finished your poll, feel free to log off and have a great afternoon.